The Last Revolutionary, Che Guevara's Final Stand. October 8th, 1967. A schoolhouse in La Higuera, Bolivia. The most wanted man in Latin America sat on a dirt floor, hands bound, blood seeping through his torn fatigues. When the executioner entered the room, Che Guevara looked up with those piercing eyes the whole world knew from posters and said 7 words that would echo through history. But nobody knows what he truly whispered in those final seconds. What could make a man who had everything, power, fame, a revolution won, throw it all away to die alone in a jungle, thousands of miles from home? Let's go back. Not to the icon, not to the t-shirt, to the man. Buenos Aires. A 23-year-old medical student named Ernesto Guevara stood in his family's apartment staring at a motorcycle. His mother watched from the doorway as he packed a small bag. "Where are you going, Ernesto?" she asked. He turned to her, that characteristic half-smile forming. "To see what's broken in this continent, Mama, and maybe how to fix it." That motorcycle journey would change everything. Across Argentina, through Chile, into Peru, he saw poverty that textbooks never mentioned. Indigenous people treated worse than animals. American corporations extracting wealth while children starved. His medical degree suddenly felt like a band-aid for a hemorrhage. But here's what nobody tells you about that trip. Ernesto Guevara didn't leave Argentina as a revolutionary. He left as an asthmatic kid who loved poetry and rugby. The transformation didn't happen in one moment. It happened in 1,000 small cuts, each one deeper than the last. Guatemala, 1954. Now working as a doctor, Ernesto witnessed something that would forge him like steel and fire. The CIA-backed coup against President Jacobo Arbenz. He watched American planes bomb a democratically elected government because they dared to redistribute land from United Fruit Company to peasants. He tried to organize resistance. Nobody listened. The government fell. Bodies filled the streets. And Ernesto Guevara made a decision in a cramped apartment while the sound of gunfire echoed outside. Reform was a lie. Only revolution could break the chains. They started calling him Che around this time, an Argentine verbal tic, like saying hey or man. It stuck. The poet was dying. The revolutionary was being born. Wait, before we go further, you need to understand something crucial about Che that changes the entire story. He was dying already. Not metaphorically, literally. His asthma was severe, chronic, often debilitating. Multiple times during his guerrilla years, he nearly suffocated to death during attacks because he couldn't reach his inhaler. Imagine that. Imagine leading men through jungle warfare while your own lungs are trying to kill you. Every breath a battle, every mission potentially his last. This wasn't a healthy man seeking glory. This was someone racing against his own mortality, trying to change the world before his body gave out. Mexico City, 1955. In a dingy apartment, Che met a stocky Cuban lawyer with a wild beard and wilder dreams, Fidel Castro. They talked all night. Castro described his plan to return to Cuba and overthrow the dictator Batista. Most people thought he was insane. Che saw something else. A chance. "When do we leave?" he asked. Castro smiled. "You don't even know if we'll succeed." Che lit a cigarette, his hand steady despite the asthma attack he'd just suppressed. "That's not what I asked." December 2nd, 1956. The yacht Grama crashed into the Cuban coast carrying 82 revolutionaries. Within 3 days, Batista's army ambushed them. 70 were killed or captured. The survivors scattered into the Sierra Maestra Mountains. Che, bleeding from a neck wound, faced a choice: grab the medical supplies or grab ammunition. He chose ammunition. The doctor was gone. The guerrilla was here. But here's what the legend doesn't tell you. Chekas was terrified. His diary from those early days reveals panic, doubt, physical agony. Every step is torture. The asthma is constant. "I'm not sure I'll see another week." Yet every morning he got up. Every night he planned the next attack. For 2 years they fought. Che evolved from a nervous doctor into Castro's most trusted commander. He was ruthless, executing deserters and traitors without hesitation, but also strategic, brilliant, inspiring loyalty through shared suffering. He didn't ask his men to do anything he wouldn't. He took the worst positions, the longest marches, the hungriest nights. Then came the decisive battle. Santa Clara, December 1958. Che led 300 guerrillas against 3,000 government troops defending Cuba's fourth-largest city. Military textbooks said it was impossible. Che derailed an armored train, captured the garrison, and broke Batista's spine. Within days, the dictator fled. Castro marched into Havana. The revolution had won. Now, here's where it gets complicated. This is the part they don't put on t-shirts. Che Guevara, at 30 years old, became one of the most powerful men in Cuba, president of the National Bank, minister of industries. He had everything revolutionaries dream about: the power to reshape society, beautiful wife, growing children. He could have relaxed, could have enjoyed the victory, but something was eating him alive, and it wasn't the asthma. Standing in his government office in 1965, wearing a suit and tie, Che felt like he was suffocating worse than any asthma attack. He'd seen it happen before. Revolutionaries who became bureaucrats, idealists who became politicians, fighters who became fat. He looked at his hands, soft from signing papers instead of holding rifles. Something inside him screamed that this was wrong, that the revolution wasn't finished, that Cuba was just the beginning. Late one night, he wrote 2 letters. One to his children: grow up as good revolutionaries. Remember that the revolution is what matters. One to Fidel Castro: I feel I have fulfilled the part of my duty that tied me to the Cuban Revolution, and I say goodbye to you, to the comrades. Just like that, he vanished. Wait, I need to tell you what actually happened here, because it's stranger than any fiction. Che didn't just leave. He faked his own disappearance so thoroughly that for months, nobody knew if he was alive or dead. Rumors spread he'd been executed by Castro, he'd gone mad, he'd been killed in the Dominican Republic. The CIA had 17 different theories. The truth? He'd shaved his beard, worn a disguise, and flown to the Congo to start another revolution. The second most powerful man in Cuba chose to become nobody, fighting in the African jungle for a cause most of his own comrades thought was hopeless. The Congo was a disaster. Corrupt leadership, untrained fighters, impossible terrain. Che's forces were routed. He returned to Cuba in secret, defeated, sick, questioning everything. Most men would have stopped, would have accepted that they'd done enough. That one successful revolution was more than most achieve in 10 lifetimes. But Che couldn't stop. The compulsion was too deep. The dream too big. Or maybe, and this is what his letters suggest, he knew he was dying anyway and wanted to die standing up. Bolivia, 1966. With a handful of fighters and CIA agents already on his trail, Che had disappeared into the mountains to start yet another revolution. It was doomed from the start. The Bolivian peasants didn't support them. The Bolivian Communist Party refused to help. Supplies never arrived. His asthma medication ran out, and still, he pushed forward. His diary entries became shorter, grimmer. No contact with outside, no recruits. Health deteriorating, but the dream remains. By October 1967, his guerrilla band had shrunk to 17 starving, sick men wandering the hills like ghosts. October 8th, a peasant woman spotted them and informed the army. Soldiers surrounded the ravine. Che's rifle jammed. Whether sabotage or bad luck, nobody knows. He was captured, wounded in the legs, unable to walk. They took him to that schoolhouse in La Higuera, a tiny village that history would never forget. For 24 hours he lay there while Bolivian and American officials debated what to do with him. Everyone knew what the decision would be. Trials were inconvenient. Che Guevara alive was dangerous. Che Guevara dead could be controlled. Here's what doesn't get told enough. Those last 24 hours, the schoolteacher who brought him water, the soldiers who asked for autographs, starstruck despite being his captors, the telegraph messages flying between La Paz and Washington, and Che sitting against a wall, knowing exactly how this ended, maintaining that same defiant dignity. Multiple witnesses recorded his conversations. He talked about philosophy with a young officer. He refused to denounce his ideals. When offered a priest, he declined. "I don't believe in that," he said simply. No drama, no speeches. Just a man waiting for the inevitable. The execution order came from the highest levels. The Bolivian president, pressured by the CIA, gave the command, "Kill him, make it look like he died in combat, disappear the body, Sergeant Mario Turan drew the short straw. Years later, drunk in a bar, he would describe entering that room. Che looked at him, no fear, no begging, just those eyes that had stared down death 100 times. "I know you've come to kill me," Che said calmly. "Shoot, coward, you are only going to kill a man." But that's the official quote. The one recorded, the one in history books. Here's what almost nobody knows. Just before Turan fired, when they were alone for a brief moment, Che whispered something else. Turan told only 2 people before he died, and they told different versions. One claimed Che said, "Tell Fidel he failed. Tell him the dream doesn't die here." Another version had him saying, "At least I lived." Did you? We'll never know the truth. Turan was too drunk, too traumatized, too conflicted to remember clearly. What we know for certain, Turan couldn't shoot Chiste in the head, couldn't look at that face. He shot him in the legs, the chest, making it look like combat wounds. Chiste took 9 bullets to die. Each shot deliberate, each one an execution masked as battle damage. When it was over, they cut off his hands, preserved them to prove they'd really killed him, displayed his body like a trophy, took photographs that spread around the world. The revolutionary was dead. Long live the icon. But here's the thing about martyrs. You can kill the man, but you weaponize the idea. Within weeks, that famous photograph, Che's body on a stretcher, eyes open, expression peaceful, looking eerily like traditional images of Christ, became the most reproduced image in history. Students in Paris carried it, workers in Prague printed it, revolutionaries from Mozambique to Peru to Vietnam adopted him as their patron saint. The CIA had tried to end a movement. Instead, they created an eternal symbol. 40 years later, they found his body in an unmarked grave near the airstrip where he was executed, brought him back to Cuba. Fidel Castro, old and frail, stood at the funeral, the 2 men who'd conquered a country together, now separated by death and time. Castro wept. Whether from genuine grief or political theater, nobody knows. Maybe both. So, what do we do with Che Guevara? The man who healed the sick and ordered executions, who fought for the oppressed and created authoritarian systems, who abandoned his children to chase impossible dreams, who could have lived comfortably, but chose to die miserably for his beliefs. He was a mass of contradictions, a doctor who learned to kill, a poet who preached violence, a man who demanded total commitment to the collective while pursuing intensely individual glory. He committed acts that were undeniably brutal. He also demonstrated courage that was undeniably real. The West turned him into a t-shirt, commodifying the very anti-capitalism he died for. The irony would have amused him, probably, or enraged him. With Che, you could never tell. He was too complex for simple narratives, too human for pure ideology, too flawed for sainthood, too principled for villainy. What we can say is this: Ernesto Che Guevara lived exactly as he chose. He saw suffering and decided to fight it. Consequences be damned. He won a revolution and walked away when it meant compromising his ideals. He died at 39, lungs failing, body broken, revolution unfinished, but never ever surrendering the belief that a better world was possible. In that schoolhouse in La Higuera facing the firing squad, he didn't beg, didn't recant, didn't betray. He met death standing up, or as close as his wounded legs allowed, defiant to the last breath. History will argue forever whether he was a hero or a villain, a liberator or a tyrant, a visionary or a fanatic. Maybe the truth is he was simply a man who believed so completely in something beyond himself that he was willing to sacrifice everything, his comfort, his family, his life, to chase it. Not many of us can say we do the same. Whether that makes him admirable or tragic or both is for you to decide. But 70 years after that motorcycle journey, 50 years after that schoolhouse execution, one thing remains certain: the world hasn't forgotten the Argentine doctor who became a revolutionary, who chose principle over power, who died fighting for a dream that maybe was always impossible, but was worth dying for anyway. Che Guevara believed that a single person burning with conviction could change the world. He proved it. Whether he changed it for better or worse is the argument that never ends. All we know is that in those final moments, wounded and captured, knowing death was seconds away, he looked at his executioner without flinching, Whatever he whispered in those last seconds, whether defiance, forgiveness, or a final secret, died with him. But the eyes in that photograph, peaceful in death, seem to ask a question that still haunts us. What are you willing to die for? And more importantly, what are you willing to live for? Che Guevara answered both questions with his life and with his death. The rest of us are still trying to figure it out.